in order for a community in Maine with the economic structure that we have to thrive, there needs to be robust housing, not only for people to have places to live, to work locally, or just to enjoy life, but also from the perspective of generating the necessary resources to kind of keep the flywheel going.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I struggle with, and one of the projects that I'm trying to do in our town is addressing the service center, the service employees. So the first responders, I can't. We have a shared ambulance service in our region, Central Lincoln County Ambulance Corps or ambulance service, and they can't hire anyone within close distance. So if they have an emergency and they need to bring somebody else in, it's an hour before somebody can get there, and they can't fill all the positions they have.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the same problem with the call fire department, the volunteer fire department. They can't get anybody else new to join in. So because no new family can afford to live in our community. So what I'm trying to focus on is how do I create housing, and this is what I'm working through now with an advisory board or advisory group. How do we create a model where we address those needs, we prioritize those needs and try to fill those spaces first for first responders, for municipal staff or school employees, daycare providers, nurses. These are all positions that are in desperate need in our community and actually keep a community alive and thriving. And without them, you're going to wither.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot of Pouliot Real Estate, each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here. And today, I'm thrilled to have joining us Kevin Sutherland, who is the town manager of the town of Newcastle, right down off Route 1 here in Maine, a beautiful little almost coastal town.
Yeah, coastal.
Yeah.
I mean, the river is part of the ocean connected to.
Yeah, tidal, right?
Tidal. Yeah, I think that's the word I was looking for. Tidal. I should know these things.
Kevin, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of information about your background, and particularly interested in how it was that you came also to work here in Maine. But before we get to that, maybe a little bit about you, your family, and what drew you to this work.
Yeah, well, so aside from the work stuff, I have a 5-year-old at home, which is a blast. And he has a dog named Banana, which he named at 3 years old. There's a story behind that, too. And I don't know if housing matters about how you get your dog, but maybe we'll save that for another one.
Yeah.
And then my wife, Kristen, who is my rock. I am in the clouds trying to solve community problems, and without her, I would be lost.
She pulls you down to earth.
She holds me down.
Sounds like my wife,
in
Heather.
a good way.
Yeah, that's good. No duct tape involved.
No, thank goodness.
So I was actually reading a little bit in your bio, though, too, that your son, his favorite day is Groundhog Day.
No, his friend who he rides to school with asked him just point blank, what is your favorite holiday? And my son just nonchalantly says Groundhog's Day. And all the kids in the car are just baffled that he would suggest that. And the one kid says, I don't even think Groundhog's Day is a holiday. He goes, oh, it is.
Take that up with Bill Murray. Yeah. So you've worked across municipal government in New York and Maine, including roles in budgeting, administration, town management, and time. Also on the private development side, which I'm wanting to talk to you about that as well today. But can you walk us through your path to municipal leadership and what ultimately brought you here to Maine?
I'll start with that last piece. What brought me to Maine was a girl. But
I've heard that a lot on this show.
Yeah. Well, it was actushe. I was supposed to go to a significant other, somebody of interest.
Yeah.
How's that? Person of interest. She. Actually in Massachusetts. So she was my wife when we lived in Ithaca. She finished her PhD at Cornell, got a job in Mathematica in Cambridge. So we ended up getting a place in Somerville. And for the entire time that I was working as the chief of staff for the city of Ithaca, basically every weekend I was driving 6 hours back and forth to be with my wife.
Wow.
And, that takes a toll on relationship, the fuel efficiency of your vehicle, the maintenance of a vehicle. So I started eventually, after some time working in Ithaca, I said I love my mayor and I love working for my mayor as the chief of staff, but I also love my wife and I want to make sure that that works. So I started looking for jobs around Massachusetts, around Boston, and all of them wanted 10 plus years of management experience. I only had 7 at that time. So then I started looking sort of the other semicircle around Boston, and it put me into southern Maine. So my first job was in Saco, Maine, as a city administrator. And the roles are a little different, but it's essentially a town manager in southern Maine. And the relationship didn't work out, but the job did, and my desire and love for Maine really stuck. So I do want to compliment you on your hat with the state of Maine on it.
Well, I've got one for you right over there if you wear hats.
Amazing. That's great, because I love it. I really do.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's we're blessed to live here. I mean, it's a beautiful state. I think we have some unique challenges demographically and so forth, but they're worth overcoming because the quality of life here and the safety that we have as well is just, I think, really hard to meet.
The natural beauty of this state is what I love so much.
Yeah. So you're here now, and you made your way up to Newcastle.
Well, I made my way up to Bar Harbor, and then I turned around and came back because
too many tourists for you out there.
It was, and my family's really young, and it's a very demanding job. And I kudos to James Smith, who's now the town manager there and doing a phenomenal job. It was just too much for me.
Yeah.
So after a stint there, I took a break, and then I got a call from the planning board chair in Newcastle. And he says, "Hey, we just lost our town manager. Would you be interested in the interim gig?" I'm like, "It's almost 2 hours drive." So I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to make that work? I'm not interested in municipal work. I was focusing in on a housing project in Ellsworth and doing some development and working with some of the businesses in the area that were desperate for housing. So I wasn't necessarily interested in the municipal gig, but man, he sold it hard. He is telling me that in 2018 they approved their comprehensive plan, and they made some major modifications to how they do zoning, and that was approved in 2020. They're ripe for a manager who has instincts in planning and development. So I came down, I interviewed with the chair and the vice chair, phenomenal people. And I finally said, all right, well, let me figure out how I can make this work. So what I would do is on Monday mornings, I'd drive down, work all day, and then the board meeting would be Monday night or not, depending on the week. And I would crash with the town manager in Damascotta, who happens to be a very good friend of mine. I presided over his wedding, and he was at my second marriage. He was my witness for my wedding.
Oh, wow.
So we're close, and we grew closer, and we're trying to work on solving community needs for the 2 towns or the surrounding area. And I would work all day Tuesday and then drive home and work remote on Wednesday, and that was my 3-day a week. And so it was a dating experience, dating the town, dating the 5 select board members, the staff that were there. And I liked it enough that they made an offer, and I said, well, I can't move here until I find one, daycare, because my kid's only 2. I got to find a place for him to go to school. Oh, he had just turned 3, sorry. And then I also need to find housing. And I'm privileged in the sense that I had 5 select board members who were trying really hard to help me find housing. I had staff who were trying to help me find. So I was privileged in the sense that people were looking for me and trying to identify a location. And we managed to find both housing and daycare, but it took some time. I can't imagine people showing up and not having that network to be able to find something, even given how difficult it was for me. But we ended up buying a place. It wasn't in Newcastle. Couldn't afford anything on the market at the time. And so I ended up in Union. I ended up in a great house in downtown Union, but it's a 25-minute commute, which is doable. But I'm a huge proponent in living where you work. And I just can't do that at this time.
So that's got to be a strong motivator to what you're doing there in terms of trying to add housing in the community. And also, you have a background in development, which we'll get into a little bit. But could you explain, we've never had a town manager on this program before. And I think that it's an important role that many times gets overlooked in terms of people when they're considering, where to locate and what to do, because they often don't necessarily think about that role in terms of its leadership capacity of driving an agenda of a local municipality when managers exist. Of course, we have municipal governments in Maine that don't have full-time managers, many of them. But for communities that do, I find that person's energy and dynamism often can make or break whether the community grows or just kind of stays stagnant. But could you explain to people what the role really kind of looks like?
Sure. And I would say that of the roughly 500, a little less than 500 towns in the state of Maine, a little over 200 of them have town administrators or town managers, or city managers or city administrators, some form of a full-time professional who's responsible for achieving the agenda of the elected officials, and in the manager role, also administering the human resource side and the staffing of the employees. So. A lot of my job, Newcastle's a much smaller town than some of the other. It's actually the smallest community I've been a manager for. But
interesting.
I only have, including myself, 4 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, and 2 stipend positions, plus a call firefighter division. So it's pretty small, but I have an incredible team. And to be able to do things like this, I can rely heavily on them to make sure we're getting the work done at the office. But a lot of what a town manager does is give direction for the board, help make sure that they're meeting state statutes. There's a lot of law in Maine that municipalities have to comply with and follow. Otherwise, they're set up for civil suits. But what I've realized, and running it efficiently and effectively, so you're keeping the mill rate, affordable for as many of your residents as you can. It's challenging, especially when there are mandates that come down from the state that aren't necessarily funded by the state, or if there are elected officials who say we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to blow our budget to do it. So it's navigating the relationship with the elected officials, helping them understand, making recommendations, and hoping that they'll be supportive of it. But if you have good trust with your board, what you recommend is usually what gets approved. So I'm fortunate to have that with the board currently. Great board, great staff, giving me flexibility to do some of these fun projects that we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
But I will point to, I think the most important piece of this has to do with the finances of a government in Maine are heavily relied on from property tax. So a municipality, in the case of Newcastle, 87% of our budget is paid for with property taxes.
Interesting.
So very small portion of that comes from state aid. Very small portion of that comes from other revenues like excise tax or other revenues. But 87% of how we pay for our budget is through property taxes.
So in communities like yours where the property values are higher, which you experience as trying to acquire a home there and others run into, that negatively impacts the amount of resources that come from the state and puts an even heavier reliance on the property tax, right?
To some extent, it's based on the formula of assessed value. So the state does a sort of clean sweep of all towns to make sure that it's equitable across the state. But yes, state valuation affects it, as well as what comes in for sales tax will determine how much we get of that, a very small portion of that.
The revenue sharing for
Correct.
that.
The revenue sharing formula is driven mostly on state valuation. The other piece is education. The law is 55% of education is paid for with state coffers. Unfortunately, almost every town has costs that go beyond what's considered the bare bones baseline that the state contributes. So it's more like only 20% or 25% that the state contributes in most communities. So if a community says we want these additional services, or in the case of you have children with disabilities in your school, there's a greater cost for that. So I think if the state were to be responsible for covering those costs for students with disabilities, or special needs that would help offset some of the overall cost. But in Newcastle, almost 50% of our municipal tax bill is education.
Interesting.
30% is public infrastructure, the point A to point B and everything in between.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is public safety. And that's about 9 or so percent. That doesn't all add up because there's still the administrative piece.
Yeah.
So about 10% of our budget is me, my staff in the office, and some of the other ancillary pieces we do for our community. So
Not a lot of levers to pull.
there aren't, and therefore we're in the business of real estate. So when you talk about housing matters, why is there a town manager sitting here? It's because we have an important role in continuing to find development opportunity where it makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we have a lot of communities in Maine that have people who have been there for a long time. And generally, there is some opposition to new development in many communities because a lot of times folks are not having this kind of conversation about, hey, like the prices are going to continue to go up for how we do business. It's a function of inflation. Even if we offered just the same services, there were no new mandates, no new requirements. The insurance premiums for health insurance for our employees and staff are going to go up. The cost of road salt is going to go up, like to pave the roads. You get it, right? And if we continue to try to tax the same base, it's just like the taxes are going to go up, and they're going to go up more exponentially in communities in which they're not addressing this issue vis-a-vis development. Yet at the same time, many folks come out and they're vehemently against development because they don't want change, because they think it's going to drive up costs. And in some cases, it may slightly increase costs, but marginally compared to what would happen if there were not additional inputs from the income side of the equation.
You hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. And this is the battle that I deal with on a regular basis in those conversations with residents.
Yeah, yeah. So
it becomes a point of the planning side of things. So now it's a conversation around, all right, well, if we know that we need to do some development in order to keep the taxes stable, to offset those increasing costs no matter what, where do we want to see development? How do we want to see that space developed?
Yeah, that's a good point, because how do you decide? Obviously, the state would give you a percentage of revenue generated from sales tax if there were more retail establishments or more services that generate sales tax. But
Nope. No?
Okay.
It doesn't work that way.
Okay.
Unfortunately, and this is a big fight with Service Center Coalition. So there's an organization called the Maine Service Center Coalition. They are communities like Damascotta. Newcastle is not one, but Damascotta is one. Bar Harbor is a big one. Portland, Saco. These places that have the hospitals, that have a lot of the sales tax generating communities. What those towns generate in sales tax doesn't come back to them anywhere near. Not directly. It goes to the state, and the state submits it back in a formula that has nothing to do with where it was generated.
Interesting.
Nothing to do with it.
So there's almost no economic incentive for adding more generation of sales tax in the community.
Correct.
Without a local option sales tax.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct. And the biggest piece for me is the positive side of that, which is different than New York was. The positive side of that is I'm not competing with Damascotta to encourage a business to open in my town versus your town. Maybe if they're building a new building, sure, because there's value there. But in terms of what gets sold in that building, I'm not competing for that, which I think is a positive. The downside is the towns that are the ones that end up with police departments, that are the ones that end up with additional code enforcement needs, they're not getting the revenue from the state to help offset those additional costs. That's put back on the taxpayer.
That's interesting from a planning perspective, because there's often a common refrain that housing is the least return because with it brings more pupils for the school potentially, or additional, costs that are higher need than, say, a business that's a 9 to 5 and then leaves. But it seems like that's not really the case, that in order for a community in Maine with the economic structure that we have to thrive, there needs to be robust housing, not only for people to have places to live, to work locally, or just to enjoy life, but also from the perspective of generating the necessary resources to kind of keep the flywheel going.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I struggle with, and one of the projects that I'm trying to do in our town is addressing the service center, the service employees. So the first responders, I can't. We have a shared ambulance service in our region, Central Lincoln County Ambulance Corps or ambulance service, and they can't hire anyone within close distance. So if they have an emergency and they need to bring somebody else in, it's an hour before somebody can get there, and they can't fill all the positions they have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same problem with my the call fire department, the volunteer fire department. They can't get anybody else new to join in. So because no new family can afford to live in our community. So what I'm trying to focus on is how do I create housing, and this is what I'm working through now with an advisory board or advisory group. How do we create a model where we address those needs, we prioritize those needs and try to fill those spaces first for first responders, for municipal staff or school employees, daycare providers, nurses. Like these are all positions that are in desperate need in our community and actually keep a community alive and thriving. And without them, you're going to wither.
Yeah, I went recently, I was mentioning to you before we started, but for those listening, to a great restaurant called Bread and the Bone in Damariscotta, just across the river from Newcastle. And I was just sitting there and talking with the proprietor. I think they were voted best restaurant in Maine this year or last year or something like that. I mean, it's a phenomenal place to go. Highly recommend it to anyone listening. But I asked her, I'm like, what is the greatest challenge that you face here as a business owner? And she's like, it's housing for our employees, you know, the people that we want to have work here. And, you know, and interestingly, I was there also not just have dinner, but to scope out a piece of land to potentially develop, you know, in that community with some housing. And, you know, it was like how, for me, my follow-up to that conversation was much more kind of driven, if you will, to reach out to the town of Damariscotta and say, hey, look, I'm looking at doing a project down here. And the town planner over there, I'll give a plug, he was very responsive and like very bullish on, you know, we've got a comprehensive plan, it's done, much like, you know, Newcastle. And, you know, what if it's built in Damariscotta or built in Newcastle, I mean, I'm sure you guys, the rising tide raises all boats, you know, because you're in close proximity there. But I'm always taken aback about communities that I reach out to, and it's almost like, hey, the bar is like way up here, like 57 feet off the floor, and if you can jump over it, we'll talk to you, you know, versus communities like yours or Damariscotta, and there are others, fortunately, in Maine, where it's like, hey, what can we do to help you? Here's the red carpet. And I think that we've gotten, it seemingly beyond kind of this stigma that like, developers are some kind of like evil, like rich mob people or something, and understand that like this is a partnership, you know, and like we need to make it as easy as we can within the confines of the rules and all the mandates and requirements that you have to make sure you don't get a civil lawsuit on your hands. But like, don't make it so bureaucratic and red tape that people are just like, I just don't feel warm and fuzzy about going there because I think it's going to make my life even more difficult.
Yeah. So you mentioned Michael Martone, who's the planner in Damariscotta. He's also the planner in Newcastle.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, we share that position between the two towns.
Okay.
So,
that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And yes, our codes are different. And what's great is that Michael can identify what's working well in one town and then work to implement it in the other and vice versa. So yeah, he's a great asset. He's heavily involved in this project we're doing on Mills Road ourselves, and so it's kind of exciting.
I mean, I'm one that believes competition is good, but when you start having, you know, 4 fire chiefs or 4 planners or 4 whatever fill in the blank within such close proximity to people, trying to compete, it can make it really difficult when we don't step back and realize like, it's already tough enough to get capital to look at, you know, Maine. A lot of times projects are being done by Mainers, which I love, but we also would welcome, you know, capital from outside of Maine making investments here. And, you know, when people are just kind of like at war with each other over trying to like win, oh, I got 10 more units than you or something, you know, who's losing? It's the people that, you know, just don't have a place to live because nothing got done. And it's really, that's encouraging to hear that Michael is splitting that role because these are small budgets and you also have ability to synergize a lot more when someone knows, like you say, what's going on across the way. You often frame infrastructure, Kevin, density and development through the lens of long-term life cycle costs rather than short-term price tags. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's actually another mentor of mine, Jim Tischler. He was in
He has a similar haircut to me.
Jim does?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Like that. Yeah.
So Jim was, has he been on your show?
I know I saw what you guys did together. A
Oh,
little
okay.
bit of it,
So
yeah.
you saw Jim works for the state of Michigan and is the director of Land Bank. I'm going to screw up his title and whatnot, but
That's okay.
He's just been
We'll send this to him first.
Great. Jim, he'll have to hammer it into my head, but he's a mentor of mine, and he is very knowledgeable about a lot of different things in the statewide realm, and he was instrumental in developing the land bank program we have now here in Maine. But he's so intelligent, and when he gets excited about something, he's selling it to me, he's pitching it to me, and I have to take 2 steps back and try to unpack what he's suggesting. And his most recent one is about the full life cycle of infrastructure and the reason why municipalities have gone bankrupt in the past. And, the biggest one of is Detroit. They built out too much without necessarily the revenue to pay for it all. And they kept borrowing money to pay for the past debt and then borrowing money to pay for the past debt. And finally, the bank said, you know what, we're going to do that anymore. So
Swan song's over.
Yeah, it's done. You're done. And I do believe there are going to be municipalities that are in that same boat, especially if we continue to allow for sprawl. Sprawl and specifically taking on ownership of new roads. So when a cul-de-sac gets built, and I map this out, like I've really spent time figuring out, all right, if you have a stretch of road, a dead-end road, and you decide to invest in that road, how much does that cost? And if you were to look at the dead-end road, just consider the 8 houses that have been built on that road. Do those 8 houses pay for that road over time? Well, when you factor in all the costs of government, everything from education, which is half of that new revenue, the other infrastructure around town, police services or code enforcement or public safety in general, fire, what is the portion of that's left to pay for that road? Well, it takes decades, if not longer, to pay for that infrastructure. In fact, the less dense, the more time it takes before you can essentially pay off your portion of the road. So the greater density you have, and I used frontage as an example. So if you have a code that says that this part of your town, you have to have 200 feet of frontage, and you're going to build a single family house, that house will never pay for that 200 feet of road. The density needs to be somewhere around 24 on a 200-foot stretch of road. So I try to encourage development that our code still allows for that. And I'm not going to change the code right now. It's probably politically a big lift to do that, but it's informing the community and helping them understand why we want to encourage development in places where it's only 20 feet or 50 feet of road frontage, or infill within our downtown where you can connect to services such as water and sewer, or you can walk to your employment or a restaurant in the evening.
And the state's kind of helped a little bit, I guess, with this, maybe. I'm curious your opinion on the matter, where very quietly, LD 1829 worked its way through the legislature, I think on some respects to the chagrin of the Maine Municipal Association, but, and in that was buried, essentially a clause that says the lot size, if it's in a designated growth area with access to public water and sewer, and there is a comprehensive plan for the community, which there would be if you had a designated growth area that's up to date, then the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. And I think that, just speaking from my time in the legislature and serving on the housing committee, a lot of times the discussions were, look, we actually want to try to help people that are in a situation like yours getting this heavy lift that you speak of that's not always politically favorable done, because math doesn't lie. It's like we can argue about a lot of different things, but math is math, and when you do the math and these projects don't add up, they don't happen, or they end up in a situation where it's not
Yeah.
financially viable locally.
So, and that's where I think the easiest lift is here, is arguing that the code should, any project that's going to have to go through an approval process, the developer can pencil it and show that the value, the future tax value, is going to pay for its share of the infrastructure. If we can come up with a standard model for that, and towns implement that into their code, their requirement for approval, that'll solve it. So you won't see as much of your farmland lost to cul-de-sacs. You won't see as much of your forests cut down and that lost.
Yes, you have the win-win of the environmental benefit while also making things more viable, because you didn't require somebody to put in 100 feet of road for one house, instead just 50 or maybe even 25, depending on how deep it is and what the setback requirements are, so that, it happens.
Right.
Right?
Yep. Well, I'll also say that Newcastle's code it's very different than most. It's a form-based code. So it doesn't, there are some restrictions, but they're mostly maximums. Like, we don't have parking requirements in our town.
One thing that I heard from recently, a developer, actually a guy who may work with me on this project in Damascotta if it comes together, is doing a project in Freeport right now, and they have a height restriction. It's like, I don't know what it is. Let's say it's 40 feet. And, he has a certain design that he's used multiple times and have had great results. Everyone loves living in these buildings. And, in order to accommodate the height restriction, he had to modify the plan by taking off the pitch roof that he typically uses and putting a flat roof. Well, he went to the planning board, and they're like, well, can you put a pitched roof on this? And he's like, I'd love to, but your code requirement is that I can't go over 40 feet. And if I put a pitched roof, it's going to be 42 feet, and then we just can all go home, and so it's just like, obviously not everybody wants a building like what they're proposing in downtown Portland, this giant, massive
30
looking
stories.
lighthouse looking thing. But like, in an era where we're trying to add housing, does it really matter if it's 40 or 50 or, I'm sure firefighters will say we don't have a ladder tall enough to get up there. There's generally some kind of safety reason to a lot of these things, but it's like, I don't know, that just seems like a bizarre one that we could maybe say, hey, no height restrictions as long as it's not more than, I don't know, at some point you got to pick a number. But
Well, that's where the form-based approach addresses that. Like, we don't want to see buildings that are beyond a certain percentage of the current stock that's there. So you can go up, just not too much higher than what's already there. Like, you look at downtown Damascotta, look at the Newcastle Public House. That's 3 full stories, and those are tall stories with a attic with some dormers. So it is at least 50 feet tall. So
it's beautiful too.
It's a really unique building. Wouldn't it be nice to have more of that?
Yeah.
And honestly, when you talk about, and this is Joe Minicozy talks about this a lot, the value per acre, not the value per property. So if you look at the value per acre, a 4-story building or a 3-story building, a 3-story building is going to have more value than a 1-story building.
Sure.
So a 4-story building is going to have more value than a 1-story building. And then you look at a structure in a downtown or a bunch of structures on a 1 acre, a total of 1 acre, and you compare that to something like a box store where they take up all these acres with mostly parking lot. The value per acre is terrible when you look at the box store versus that of a stretch of buildings along Main Street. So that value, there's where your real value is in your structures in your downtown.
Yeah, we've been really blessed here in Augusta, and there are other communities that are like this too. We'll be talking with folks from the town of Bath, later on in 26, and they've really been very focused on ensuring that there's a lot of support politically and also financially for the downtown, because per square foot, we generate the most amount of tax. The building that we're sitting in right now, I did not get a TIF to do this. I'll share with the audience. We pay like $24,000 a year in property taxes just for this one building, and happy to do it. The numbers work and everything, but it's like, you would have to build a lot of, other structures more spread out in order to generate that kind of tax revenue.
When you think about it, the median home probably generates around $4,000 to $6,000 a year in taxes. So how many homes are you going to need to spread out on those 1 acre parcels to accommodate exactly what your one little building does?
Yeah. And you've been really clear in your work in getting more focused around the downtown center, right? As a sense of place, but also for some of these reasons that we've discussed.
Yeah, I mean, climate's a big reason too. Like if somebody doesn't need to get into a car to get to work, they've already reduced their transportation pollution.
Yeah, and save on their budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's a big piece of it too. That's one thing I was trying to do a while back was have conversations with banks about, like 30% of your income should be for housing. Well, what if you don't own a car because you live, work, and play all in the same place, and you walk to work or you ride a bike?
That's interesting.
Could you shift some of that, what was transportation cost, back into housing? Could
So
you go
maybe
up to
for
40%?
somebody, if there were a new condo development done in downtown Newcastle, they could qualify for maybe 40% loan to value instead of 30 because as long as they're working close by and they're able to go to the grocery store close by, they don't have that additional cost. That's interesting. I've never heard anybody put it that way before.
Then I didn't get very far with some of the banks, but it was a thought I had. But.
Yeah, they're pretty conservative.
Yeah, I found that out.
Yeah. So Newcastle's actively working on a downtown project on a tax-foreclosed vacant lot with the town playing a direct role in carrying the project forward. This is interesting to me because often you don't see government leading the charge with the actual development part of it. It's more so we're just going to make sure the rules are in order and then we sit back and wait. It's like deer hunting in Maine,
Yeah. Well, we're not interested in doing deer hunting in downtown Newcastle. We're interested in actually seeing housing housing come to fruition. Honestly, I think this parcel, I could find a developer to do the project. But if we want to talk as a community about achieving the goals we have to address some of these needs, maybe we should carry it forward. And maybe we should create a model that other municipalities can borrow from or
Can you tell people about the project a little bit?
So we acquired a piece of land it's like literally around the corner from the main street. It is part of our downtown. And it's tucked behind a bunch of the houses. So it's 1.2 acres. It's large enough to do a couple of options, either some 8-unit buildings or a couple of rows of townhouses, something back there. The density, again, I mentioned density when you're talking about frontage. We only have about 40 feet of frontage, and that would be the access point in.
Like a flag lot, kind of.
Yeah. So its cost for the infrastructure there is minimal. So the density doesn't have to be as great, but I still want to get somewhere between 24 and 30 or 32. And I want the community's input. So we're in the early stage of this. We acquired it. The state changed the law around tax foreclosure. So now if a town acquires a piece of property in automatic tax foreclosure, what has to happen is the elected officials have to make a decision about do they want to keep it for municipal use or do they want to offload it? And to offload it, the first question is to the former owner, can you come up with the money to pay your back taxes and then you can have the property back? If they don't want it or can't do it, as a real estate option, you have to go through a couple of realtors before moving on to a bid process.
I was on the tax committee when we passed that.
Yeah. It's,
I actually voted against the way they structured it.
Well, I did it. I followed it to the T.
Yeah.
We acquired it properly. We did all our notifications, so we acquired it property. So I'm not worried about 946B. Sorry, that's
okay.
I've got the lingo in my head. We followed the process, so we own the property. But what we have to do is, if we're going to keep it for municipal use, it had to be appraised, and then we had to pay the former owner the value of the land minus the taxes and some of my time and the attorney's time. We got a grant through the Lincoln County. They had some ARPA funds left, and they were allocating it to address housing needs in Lincoln County. And I will give huge props to Lincoln County and their efforts to try to address housing in our county. And they've allocated a lot. The money they got, instead of doing something for their government, they used the money to address housing needs. So they had a little leftover money, so I asked for $120,000, and about 80 of that was used to pay the back taxes and pay the former owner. Because of how complex it was to get into that site, and I've addressed a lot of those needs working with my board and working with some neighbors to make sure I have a nice way to get in and out of that site. We also hired engineering firm, Acorn Engineering, and Kaplan Thompson Architects to do
great.
due diligence work on the site. We have a clean slate. Like, it is a boring site because there's no problems with it. And then we also hired KTA to do some concept designs. And they're concepts. So we got a couple of ideas out there, and that's where we are right now. My next stage is to work with what I'm calling my advisory group. It's architects, engineers, finance, my planner, my attorney. How do we develop this site as a community? My select board is phenomenally supportive of it. Obviously, they have questions about, all right, who's going to pay for this? Who's going to carry the risk? And then that might be a public-private partnership to get this to the finish line. I don't know what it looks like yet. I'd love to come back and tell you all about it when it's done.
Well, I might be interested in being involved somehow.
Hey, all right.
That's exciting, because that was the thought going through my head, like, who gets the debt or somehow raises the funds to actually put shovels in the ground
Yeah.
and start putting structures up.
Well, so to me, the issue is right now we own the property for municipal use.
Right.
So one thought is, if we're going to build a road, a town road, it's an interconnectivity. There's a way to get to Academy Hill Road to Mills Road. So we could actually make a road that I'm going to make sure that it pencils, the road itself is paid for by the new development that happens over time. But if we build that road in there, we have created municipal use, and I think we retain the land. So there's no land cost to the development that happens. We already own the land.
Okay.
And it's, 99-year lease or 100-year lease or whatever we're allowed to do.
Yeah.
That's why I have an attorney to help me.
You'll have a
figure
lot
that
more
out.
conversations with banks about how people can finance the structures that are on there, right?
That's the piece is, who's helping us make sure that whatever building gets built on there,
Yeah.
that's retained for the developer or the person who ends up buying the building.
This is really interesting, because I want to bring this back to where we first started. Like, hey, I'm Kevin coming to, Newcastle for my new job, and I want to live somewhere. This could be any Kevin.
Right.
Maybe it's one of the Kevins that'll run the Federal Reserve here pretty soon. But anyway.
He's not moving to Newcastle, that's for sure.
But anyway.
Let's use Kevin from Home Alone.
Yeah, right. I love that.
Okay, all
That's
right.
great. Get a nice scarf, and play some movies, get the bad guys to go away. So you're pulling into town, and you're like, oh, there's a great home available for sale. And you look into it more, and you find out, like, yep, I'm going to be buying the home, but I'm not buying the land under it. And the way that this is possible is the municipal government owns the land. They have agreed to a 99-year lease on that land. I'm going to own the home and be able to build wealth of owning that structure, and someday maybe sell it, right? But that is much less expensive because I'm not also having to buy the land. And that's really kind of an interesting approach, because it's not altogether different than some of the models that I've looked at to create land lease communities for manufactured homes. But instead of the land being owned by the municipality, it's owned by, a private developer. And that, I think, really could work in a way that, like, the municipality then gets a structure which could be taxed, generates tax revenue to help offset some of the costs that you talked about with putting the road in and different things like that. But the person is actually able to qualify to buy the property because the actual purchase price is so much lower without the 50 to 100,000 plus for their parcel of land.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it also from grant standpoint to try to get the earthwork done. So I'm chasing down a grant right now to help us cover the cost of the earthwork. So I'm already, whoever does do the development project or builds the buildings for us and then sells them already has some costs taken out of this equation.
It's
and
not really
the
a
goal
lot.
is, if I'm having these community conversations now about what we as a community want to see there, the risk is reduced in terms of actually getting the project through them.
Yeah, and not altogether different than someone maybe getting a condo, like everybody's in
Yeah.
a condo building. Nobody owns the land themselves. It's shared among the association. So
Yeah,
creating a municipal condo association.
And honestly, the conversations Michael and I have had with community partners, potential community partners. Lincoln Academy. We've talked to the head of school. We've talked to YMCA about their need for employees, especially on the daycare side. We've talked to the hospital for need for nurses and doctors and staff that work there. Even the Darling Center we've reached out to, so that's the University of Maine. So the sheriff's office, you name it. We've
Everyone's
been having
got a
those
need.
conversations. Everybody says yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm to the point now where, all right, what does that structure look like? Is it these entities have stake in the project? Are they, if we're doing a couple of apartment buildings in addition to a row of townhouses for sale, or they're condoized, do those entities own one of these units? And trying to address, like, as you mentioned, bread and the bone, they have employees that they can't find housing for. If the high school has a unit for a teacher that they can bring from outside of their normal distance that they can get somebody in, you can actually bring somebody in and have them living somewhere.
That's really cool.
So-
and that helps address this next part that I want to talk to you about, which is the stigma that often surrounds development and the need to shift how communities talk about growth. Like, how do you approach building that trust? I mean, this sounds like part of it, what we've just discussed, but around development and helping the community see it as a tool for strengthening place rather than something to fear.
Well, that's where a lot of that upfront community conversations have to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that there has to be, working with developers, being able to show all the information, share the information. You know, this isn't about, for me, this isn't about a developer making a lot of money on this. This is working with a developer who wants to see and address this housing crisis we're in. They're the one that we want to work with to actually see this happen. They're going to have to help us prove that we need to go from, you know, what's allowed is about 2.5, 3 stories. We need to go up another story, and why, and be able to show the financial numbers to say this is why it has to happen. Because without it, I can't make the financing work to bring in, you know, the price point you want to see happen here.
So transparency, really.
Extreme transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the partnership piece.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be a two-way street too. A lot of times we're wanting to put the onus on the municipality, or it's the NIMBY's fault or something like that. But I just recently, we're working on a project just down the street here where we needed to get a TIF in order for it to work because the economics have changed drastically since this project was done. The interest rates are more than double. Construction costs are nearly almost double in just the last, 5 years. And we went to the TIF review committee in the city with our pro forma.
Yeah.
Like, hey guys, here's how much money we're going to make on this. It's like $2,000 a month after everything's done for a $2 million project. That's like, I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not like
There's huge risk there.
You can get that by buying an existing building somewhere else in Maine and just put your down payment and move on with life with no meetings or any dealing with a construction crew or trying to fill up a building or anything.
Right.
And I think once they were able to see that, they were like, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're trying to figure out a way to buy your next golf membership with it, Mr. Developer. It's like, hey, this is the only way that this is a go or no go. And if we don't do this, nothing happens. And this particular building, the upper floors have been vacant for 50 years.
Right.
I'm like, guys, this can either be good for a Halloween spooky tour once a year, or we can actually have 8 apartments in it. You decide, totally up to you, And it's not like that's really just what's going to happen if it weren't to move forward. Fortunately, Augusta and many other communities like yours and others are forward thinking enough to say, yeah, it's worth our investment. And there's ways in which TIFs are structured too to support that. But like, does Newcastle have a TIF program?
We don't currently.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to go there. I'd rather find other tools to address those needs.
Yeah.
And I don't. So every town is different in terms of how TIFs are a benefit or not for the municipality.
Sure.
In part based on state valuation.
Yep.
And
It's really complex.
It's a very complex.
We'd have to have like 2 more shows to dig into it.
Yeah, I'm going to need a whiteboard and I'm going to need a whiteboard in order to explain that one.
Because there's this side of the equation, but then you get more from the state if you do this. It's like very complicated.
Right, but my issue is when the tax revenue goes, when the future value, so the building itself would sit there at its current rate. So once it goes into a TIF and it's redeveloped, that valuation is not seen in formulas that the state uses, and that value is put into a separate bank account, essentially for the town to use to either have a credit enhancement agreement, which comes back to you as a developer, or it's used for very specific things, and that has become more broad over time, but it doesn't help the base taxes. And if you're already the highest taxed town in the tier, there's no financial benefit.
Right.
And this is why I can't explain it just in person.
But it's tough. I think I'm glad that you did get to that point, because there may be some in a development community that would say, well, I don't want to go there because they're not development friendly. They won't do a TIF. It's like they are development friendly, but based on all these different, formulas that exist between state and local and whatnot, there's actually no economic incentive to do it.
Thank you. It's the economic incentive for the town to do it or not. And I'd rather so I haven't gone through the process of figuring that out, but I can tell you, like Saco, for every dollar that we would bring in, we would lose 50 cents of that to the formula that brings in our municipal revenue service and our aid to schools. So because of, and the county tax. So new valuation goes up, your share of the county tax goes up as well. So every dollar that we got for new development, 50 cents of it went away.
Yeah.
It disappeared.
Yeah.
So that's where you want to shelter some of that value for the next 10, 20, 30 years and use those resources, because then every dollar that comes in is a dollar you get to spend. I will say, I know Old Orchard Beach at the time, if they got $1 of new development, they would see 5 cents lost, or they'd see 5 cents lost. So they didn't want to do it. There was no reason for them to do a TIF. The economics just don't work for them.
Yeah. I mean, and these are all the complexities that you have to deal with, along with personnel matters.
Yes. I still have staff. I still have relationships with my elected officials. I have some of my favorite residents who come visit me on a regular basis. So, but I just love what I do. I'm very passionate about it.
That's good. I'm sure really good for a guy with your personality that's really liking to dig into and solve complex problems, but is also very curious. You know?
No, I'm always learning. And I'm always asking questions and meeting with whoever I can to try to figure it out. So.
Yeah, well, I love this creative approach that you talked about with the downtown project, and we don't have time to get into it today, but just for those listening, Newcastle's had some really great new development projects with housing, using modular offsite constructed buildings as an approach to try to deliver to the market quickly, and really embracing that, which is wonderful to see. And
16 new units and 2 buildings, and are right next to the project we're looking to do.
That's super cool.
Awesome. It's very awesome.
So I want to wrap up with this. Small towns are facing rising infrastructure costs, housing pressure, climate impacts, and limited capacity. When you look ahead, what, in your opinion, feels most urgent for Maine towns to get right? And where do you see real opportunity if communities are willing to rethink some old assumptions?
It's identifying those residents who have an opportunity, who have the capacity to move, but nowhere to move to. So if I have residents who are older and are up against the cost of owning a home, both from the taxes and just upkeep, those are the folks I want to get to have conversations with about, all right, if we can find ways to develop housing for you, how can we make a switch so we can get a family in your 4-bedroom home that you're not using?
Have you been reading my dreams or Cliff Notes or something?
No,
so just
I haven't.
Last night I got a call from a person who's in the governor's office tasked with what's coming up this next legislative session. And I had literally just written an email to them along with Maine Housing and others saying, look, I meet with hundreds of seniors a year in my capacity as a real estate agent who live in their home that has zero mortgage, yet they're also on a fixed income. They cannot go to the bank and get a home equity line of credit to go build a new structure. They also don't want to be in charge at their age of trying to oversee a general contractor to build a building or whatever. But they have a ton of equity that could be tapped into. Why don't you, the state, put together a bond and create a revolving loan fund where you're creating a product for these seniors? Call it Making Mainers Move or something. And you go to them and you say, look, if you'll agree to move into a home that was newly created, we will give you, at no interest and no payment for like 12 months, the money to put toward that home being created, or assurance to the developer that that home would be created if you do it in this community because there's X number of people in this situation, right? And then they move into that newly constructed home, sell the one to the people that you just described, like the ones that are okay with the stairs and repairs, and maybe the heat bill is higher, but they figure out a way to creatively deal with it, because they're up and coming. And then the senior is in a new home that is energy efficient, one level maybe living, safer for them, but still in the same community, so they keep their same doctor and their same friends and all the things they like to do.
Yeah. I was reading your email.
I must have emailed you too.
Yeah, I was accidentally CC'd. I was in your Signal chat. It must have just been.
Keep an eye on that. This is really interesting because, well, we should try it first in Newcastle, it sounds like.
Sure, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah.
And the other piece is we're a heavily tree state. If I don't know if you know them, we have a lot of trees in the state. And I know the PUC recently didn't approve the budget that CMP wanted to address a lot of tree ground to sky clearing, and so I know we're going to continue to have power outages. So I think what towns can be doing is developing programs to help people who are going to lose power. So we did it, and this is the resiliency side of things. So if a community isn't part of the Maine Won't Wait, the community resiliency partnership, and they haven't applied for a community action grant, those towns should do it. And if you don't know if your town has it, you should ask, because there's the resources to put towards things like battery lending programs, where you can hand out batteries. They're a little heavy for the 85-year-old to be carrying around, but if you have a group of volunteers who can deliver those before a storm, so if you're going to lose power, you have a mini generator that can keep your fridge running in the summer, or put a heater on, or your Rinnai can connect to it. No problem for hours.
Well, that's great.
So we have 16 of them. We just got them through a community action grant, and we're working through the how do we hand those out to residents during these events. Yeah.
Well, of course, the podcast doesn't stay within the confines of Maine, and I would imagine that across the U.S., many managers or administrators are dealing with these same challenges that you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people who are listening to understand that oftentimes you can make a lot of progress by going to meet with a city manager in a community or the town administrator and saying, hey, here's what's going on, because you have these relationships with the elected officials. And sometimes, obviously, the elected officials should be able to be turned to as well to say, hey, this is an issue. I'd like you to bring it forward. But sometimes those can run into like political ends, whereas if you bring it forward as, hey, this is something the town is interested in, maybe it's met with a little bit less resistance.
Yeah.
And is able to be moved forward.
I'd always start with the town office. At least the staff there, even if they don't have a town manager, the staff understand the local dynamics and can help either steer you in the right direction or get you in contact with an elected official who can try to spearhead an effort.
So, final word. Why is the dog's name Bananas?
Just Banana.
Banana.
And he is Bananas. I don't know. Bananas. I don't know. My 3-year-old was just, when we went to this. All right, I'm going to tell it. 2 minutes.
You got it.
2 minutes. My son and I are on a tour to visit every brewery in the state of Maine. And we went down to Footbridge Brewing in Booth Bay. And they were having a dog adoption event at this brewery. And Andy, who's the town manager in Damerscott, was with me and my son Rex. We went in there. They have the dog adoption event. We get our beer. We sit down. Rex is petting the dogs. There's cute puppies. And I'm like, no, not going to happen. So what we do when we go to breweries, we look for 3 things. 1, he doesn't need it anymore, but do they have a changing table in the bathroom? 2, do they have games or other things for families or kids to do? And 3, is the beer any good? That is solely my responsibility, not Rex's.
Rex doesn't test
Rex does not taste test the beer, I promise you. But he does experience as many of the games that they might have.
Yeah.
Well, this brewery happened to have a pristine version of the game of life.
Okay.
And so we set it up. After we pet the dogs, we went over to the corner and we started playing the game of life. Wouldn't you know it, on the second roll, my son lands on adopt a pet. And Andy just starts digging into me. You gotta get this dog. It's a sign. And so I let my son go look at the dogs again. I said, and I sat, I got down on my knee and I explained to him, huge responsibility for a dog, kid. You want one of these, you have to walk it in the morning, night, during the day. You have to feed your dog. It's going to be expensive. It's going to have to go to the vet. You're going to have to take care of this dog. And he's just nodding at me like, yeah, I'll do all that. Yeah, no problem, Dad. I said, all right, we can get a dog. Why don't you pick one? I'm looking at that gorgeous dumb lab, and he picks the mutt. That is, I don't know, very cute, but also clearly got shepherd in it, so I know I'm going to have a handful. And he picks the shepherd, not the dumb lab. So once we got I kept checking in with him. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? And then I said, all right, well, what do you want to name your dog? And he just goes, Banana. I said, okay.
That's awesome.
Banana. Then it did. There it is. So, yes, it's confusing when we go to dog parks, and I'm either yelling Rex, which is typically a dog name, or Banana. People look like I'm crazy.
That's awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for making the trek up here to join us today. Really appreciate it, and the insight as well, and mostly your leadership. It's just so important that we have people on the front lines that are committed to this. Adding housing is so much of a critical need in our state, and it can't happen without good people right there on the front lines getting it done. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very much. And I look forward to coming back after we've gotten through at least the groundbreaking of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay in touch about that.
All right, sounds good.
Cheers.
Thank you.